I'm Mark Anderson, and at 32, I had built a thriving construction business from the ground up. No handouts, no shortcuts, just relentless hard work. I thought that would finally earn me my parents' respect. Instead, they blindsided me. At a family meeting with their lawyer, they announced they were leaving everything, house, savings, even their insurance, to my younger brother, Kyle. Me? I got a box of old baseball cards and my grandmother's recipe book. Turns out the $800 I'd been sending them every month wasn't for their mortgage. It was to fund Kyle's latest doomed business. That was the moment something in me snapped. And what I did next changed our family forever. Before I tell you the full story, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt unseen despite giving your all, hit like and subscribe. This story might be the one you've been waiting to hear. My childhood unfolded in a modest, tree-lined neighborhood just outside Boston. My father, David, worked in insurance. He pulled in a steady salary, enough to keep us comfortable, to ensure there was always food on the table and a roof over our heads. But we were never swimming in money. My mother, Carol, was a third-grade teacher at the local elementary school, a job she loved and poured her heart into. From the outside, anyone looking in would probably have seen us as the quintessential middle-class American family, stable, traditional, maybe a little quiet. But inside our four walls, the dynamics were, well, they were far from balanced. My brother Kyle is 5 years younger than me. And honestly, from the moment he arrived, it felt like the spotlight in our family had a permanent, unshakable tilt in his direction. I was the serious kid, the one who studied hard, who loved to read, who always got straight A's and followed every rule to the letter. Kyle, on the other hand, was the charming one. Social, charismatic, always surrounded by friends, even though he notoriously struggled academically. He had this natural magnetism, this easy laugh that seemed to draw people in. This fundamental difference in our personalities might not have been an issue in some families, but in ours, it created an almost visible division of parental affection. It wasn't malicious, not openly anyway, but it was there like a faint, persistent hum in the background of our lives. I still remember my high school graduation vividly. The summer air was thick and humid, the kind that promised an afternoon thunderstorm but never delivered. I was valedictorian, standing on that stage, squinting into the bright lights, delivering a speech I'd spent weeks agonizing over. I'd earned a partial scholarship to Boston University and had been accepted into their incredibly competitive engineering program. It felt like a monumental achievement, the culmination of years of hard work. My parents were there, of course, sitting in the audience, politely applauding, but the celebration afterward was minimal. A quick, somewhat perfunctory dinner at Applebee's, a card with a crisp $50 bill tucked inside, almost as an afterthought. And then, before I could even finish my fries, the conversation, almost inevitably, quickly pivoted to Kyle's upcoming baseball tournament, just 2 weeks away. His team had made it to regionals, and that was the real news. 2 weeks later, when Kyle's team actually won that regional championship, it was a different story entirely. My parents threw a massive backyard barbecue. The entire extended family was invited. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, neighbors. The grill was smoking, music was playing, laughter filled the air. And in the middle of it all, my parents presented Kyle with a brand new, top-of-the-line gaming system, wrapped in shiny paper, complete with celebratory fanfare. It wasn't the material difference that stung, not really. It was the vast, undeniable enthusiasm gap. My achievements, the ones I had worked tirelessly for, were acknowledged, maybe with a nod and a quiet, good job. Kyle's triumphs, especially the ones that came with less effort, were outright celebrated, loudly and joyfully. It created this deep, quiet ache inside me, a feeling that no matter what I did, I would always be playing second fiddle. College was when the financial disparities became not just noticeable, but impossible to ignore. Despite my partial scholarship to Boston University, I still needed to cover a significant portion of my tuition. My parents contributed what they could, about a quarter of the total costs, but they made it abundantly clear that the rest was my responsibility. I took out modest student loans, the kind you hope to pay off quickly, and I dove headfirst into a relentless schedule of 3 part-time jobs. Mornings, I was slinging coffee at a campus coffee shop, the scent of espresso permanently clinging to my clothes. Evenings, I'd be hunched over textbooks, working at the campus library, shelving books, and helping students with research. And on weekends, I'd be doing construction work with my uncle's company, hauling lumber, swinging hammers, learning the ropes of the trade. I barely slept, fueled by caffeine and sheer willpower, but I managed it. I graduated with minimal debt, a degree in engineering, and perhaps more importantly, a wealth of valuable hands-on work experience. Kyle's college experience, however, was a completely different universe. He attended a private university across the state, a place with a tuition bill nearly double what mine had been. And despite his consistently mediocre grades, the kind that barely kept him eligible, my parents covered every single one of his expenses. Tuition, paid, housing, covered, meal plan, handled. Even a generous allowance for spending money. The kind of money I could only dream of. I remember one time, during a rare weekend visit home, I cautiously brought up the disparity to my father. I asked him, as gently as I could, why things were so different for us. He just shrugged, looking vaguely uncomfortable. "Kyle isn't as independent as you are, Mark," he said, his voice flat, dismissive. "He needs more support." That was it. No further explanation. It felt like a dismissal, a quiet reaffirmation that I was simply expected to manage on my own, while Kyle needed their constant, unfettered financial safety net. That pattern, that quiet but undeniable favoritism, continued long after graduation. I discovered, almost by accident, that I had a real knack for construction work and project management. I enjoyed the problem-solving, the tangible results, the satisfaction of building something from the ground up. I saved every single penny from my entry-level job at a construction firm, squirreling away every dollar. I spent my nights taking business management classes, fueled by cheap coffee and an unyielding desire to create something of my own. Eventually, at 26, I took the leap and launched Anderson Contracting. Those first 2 years were absolutely brutal. I'm talking 80-hour work weeks, minimum. I literally slept on a beat-up mattress in my office to save on rent, waking up to the smell of sawdust and stale coffee. Every single dollar of profit went right back into the business. New equipment, better materials, hiring a small crew. There were no vacations, no dating life, just work and determination. It was a grind, but it was my grind. And I was building something real. Meanwhile, Kyle bounced. He'd jump between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. He'd claim he was finding his passion, a phrase that, in our family, had become synonymous with finding his way to bars and parties. When he turned 25, he announced, with all the fanfare of a major corporate merger, that he wanted to open a sports memorabilia store. Despite having absolutely zero retail experience, no business knowledge, and a track record of financial irresponsibility, my parents didn't hesitate. They remortgaged their house to give him $75,000 in startup capital. $75,000. My jaw nearly hit the floor when I heard. The business predictably failed within 8 months. Kyle naturally blamed everything but himself. The location, the economy, online competition. Anything but his own mismanagement, his tendency to treat the store's inventory as his personal gift shop for impressing friends, or his complete lack of a business plan. My parents, of course, wrote off the loss with minimal criticism. They just kept supporting him financially. It was as if they saw his failures as charming quirks, while my struggles were just expected. During this same period, my father had a health scare, a minor heart attack that required surgery and several weeks of recovery. Insurance covered most of it, but there was still a significant gap, about $30,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. I paid it, without hesitation. I had to put off purchasing some new heavy equipment that would have significantly helped my growing business, but it wasn't even a question. They were my parents. They needed help. They thanked me, of course, but there was this underlying air of expectation about it, as if it was simply my duty as the successful son, something I was just supposed to do, without complaint or special recognition. This established a pattern that became the defining dynamic of our family. I became the family's unofficial financial safety net, the dependable son, the one who could always be counted on for a bailout, a loan, an unexpected bill, and in return, minimal emotional support, almost no recognition for my own achievements. Sunday family dinners, which were supposed to be about family connection, became a stage for Kyle's latest wild ideas, his new passion, his latest adventure. He'd hold court, regaling my parents with tales of his dreams, his plans, his grand, often impractical schemes. Meanwhile, my business achievements, the tangible, hard-won successes of Anderson Contracting, were given, at best, a cursory acknowledgement. A quick, "That's nice, Mark," before they turned back to Kyle. I'd sit there, listening to my parents gush about how Kyle was finding himself, while I was building something real, something sustainable, something that provided jobs for people. It was a quiet, constant erosion of my self-worth. Last year, the financial drain escalated. My parents mentioned, almost casually, that they were struggling with their mortgage payments due to rising property taxes. Without hesitation, I set up an automatic monthly transfer to their account. It was $2,800 a month, $2,800 every single month. Money I could have been investing in my business, pouring into new equipment, expanding my team, or saving for my own future, perhaps a down payment on a house of my own. But they were my parents, and despite everything, despite the years of subtle slights and blatant favoritism, I loved them. I wanted to ensure they were comfortable. I never expected gratitude, not really, but I did expect fairness. I expected that when the time came, when their modest assets were divided, it would be done equally. After all, while they might have favored Kyle emotionally, surely they wouldn't extend that blatant favoritism to financial matters after death, especially given how much I'd contributed to their financial stability over the years. I couldn't have been more wrong. The call from Mr. Henderson, my parents' attorney, came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was up to my elbows in dust and drywall, overseeing a complex kitchen remodel in downtown Brooklyn. His voice, when he spoke, was professionally neutral, almost unsettlingly so. He explained that my parents had requested my presence at their estate planning meeting that Friday. When I asked for details, for some inkling of what this was all about, he simply said it would be best to discuss everything in person. Something in his tone, a slight hesitation, a barely perceptible shift, made me uneasy. A tiny prickle of paranoia began to form at the back of my neck, but I dismissed it. Told myself I was overthinking, just stressed from work. Friday arrived. I drove from my apartment in the city, pulling up to the law office in downtown Boston. It was a sleek, modern glass building that just screamed expensive hourly rates. I'd even dressed in my best business casual outfit, dark, well-fitting jeans and a freshly pressed button-down shirt. Construction work doesn't demand much formal attire, but I keep a few nice pieces for important client meetings. The receptionist, with a practiced, polite smile, directed me to conference room 3. When I walked in, the moment my hand left the doorknob, I immediately sensed something was off. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. My parents, David and Carol, sat stiffly on one side of a long, polished mahogany table, their shoulders rigid, their gazes fixed somewhere beyond my head, avoiding eye contact. Kyle was beside them, fidgeting nervously with his watch. It was an expensive Tag Heuer, the kind I knew, with absolute certainty, he couldn't afford on his own. Mr. Henderson, the attorney, sat at the head of the table, his movements precise, almost clinical. Manila folders, thin and neatly arranged, lay before him. "Mark," Mr. Henderson began, his voice smooth, unhurried. "Thank you for coming." He gestured to the empty chair directly across from my family, the one clearly reserved for me. "Now that everyone's here, we can begin." The conference room felt unnaturally cold, despite the warm spring sunshine filtering through the windows. Abstract art, probably selected to impress high-paying clients, hung on the walls, muted pieces in corporate blues and grays, completely devoid of any real warmth or personality. I took my seat, settling into the plush leather chair. I noticed my mother's nervous glance at my father, who continued to stare fixedly at the tabletop, as if the grain of the wood held some profound secret. "As you know," Mr. Henderson continued, opening the top folder with a crisp, rustling sound, "we're here to discuss Robert and Susan's estate planning." He paused, letting the words hang in the silent room. "They've made some decisions they feel are important to communicate clearly while everyone is present." He pulled out several documents, aligning them precisely on the table. "I'll be direct," he said, his voice unwavering. "David and Carol have decided to place all of their assets in Kyle's name, with him as sole beneficiary of their estate." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mind scrambled, trying to process them. It couldn't be right. I must have misheard. The concept was so utterly alien, so completely out of sync with my expectations, that my brain simply refused to accept it. I'm sorry, I managed to stammer, my voice sounding distant, almost unreal. What? I looked directly at my parents, searching their faces for some sign of a joke, some hidden meaning, but they still wouldn't meet my eyes. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice devoid of emotion, his clinical detachment almost unbearable. Their home, investment accounts, insurance policies, and personal property will all transfer to Kyle upon their passing. You, Mark, will receive your father's collection of baseball cards and your grandmother's recipe book, as specifically requested by your mother. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The air knocked clean out of me. Baseball cards? A recipe book? After everything I'd done, after all the years of financial support, of putting their needs before my own, this had to be a joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. This is a joke, right? I looked directly at my father, my voice strained, pleading for some explanation. He finally raised his eyes, meeting mine for the first time. His gaze was weak, wavering. Mark, he said, his voice attempting firmness. But it cracked, revealing the underlying uncertainty. We've given this a lot of thought. You're successful. You've built a thriving business. Kyle needs more security than you do. My mother jumped in, her voice high-pitched and brittle, a thin veneer of justification barely concealing her discomfort. We're just trying to be practical. You've always been so good at taking care of yourself. Practical? Good at taking care of myself? Because I was forced to? My anger, cold and sharp, began to simmer. I turned back to Mr. Henderson, forcing myself to remain calm. Can you explain exactly what assets we're talking about here? He nodded, seemingly unfazed by the tension, and began listing them methodically. The house, valued at approximately $650,000, which I understand has been significantly paid down. Investment accounts totaling about $180,000, life insurance policies with combined benefits of $300,000. And then came the bombshell, the one that made everything click into place, transforming the quiet ache into a searing pain. Additionally, Mr. Henderson continued, his gaze flicking briefly to my parents. Your parents recently took out a new mortgage on their home to provide capital for Kyle's new business venture. The mortgage amount is $425,000 with monthly payments of $2,800. My head spun. $425,000 with monthly payments of exactly $2,800, the exact amount I'd been transferring monthly for the past year. It hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't needed help with existing mortgage payments. They'd remortgaged their nearly paid-off home, the home I'd thought was relatively secure, the home I'd been helping them with, to fund another of Kyle's doomed business ideas. And they'd done it knowing, absolutely knowing, that I would cover the payments. My money wasn't helping them live comfortably. It was fueling Kyle's latest pipe dream. What business venture? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, turning to Kyle. Even he had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, his gaze shifting from his expensive watch to the floor. An upscale sports bar, my mother said quickly, a note of misplaced pride in her voice. Prime town location. Very promising. And you expect me to keep making these mortgage payments? I asked, incredulity lacing every word. My father cleared his throat, a weak shuffling sound. We'd appreciate your continued support during this transitional period, once Kyle's business takes off. So let me get this straight, I interrupted, struggling to keep my voice even, to prevent the tremor of rage from breaking through. You've remortgaged your house to fund Kyle's business, knowing I've been making your monthly payments. You've put everything you own in Kyle's name. And you expect me to continue paying a mortgage for a house I will never have any claim to? A house that will go entirely to my brother, along with everything else you own? The room fell silent, the tension almost unbearable. Kyle, my brother, examined his manicured fingernails with an air of profound disinterest. My mother dabbed at non-existent tears with a tissue, her face a mask of feigned distress. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unable to meet my gaze. Mark, Mr. Henderson interjected, his voice attempting to regain control of the room. I understand this may come as a surprise. A surprise? I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound even to my own ears. A surprise is a birthday party. This is... I struggled to find the right word. This is a betrayal. Don't be so dramatic, Kyle finally spoke, rolling his eyes, his voice dripping with condescension. It's not like you need their money. I stared at my brother. This person, who had been given everything, handed opportunity after opportunity. While I had worked for every single scrap, every single success, he didn't even have the self-awareness, the basic human decency to recognize his own privilege. In his mind, this was just the natural order of things. Him receiving, me providing. It was all he had ever known, all he had ever expected. "Is there anything else I need to know?" I asked Mr. Henderson, ignoring Kyle completely, as if he hadn't spoken at all. Mr. Henderson glanced briefly at my parents, then back to me. "These documents are already signed and legally binding," he said, stating the obvious. "I suggested a more equitable distribution, but your parents were adamant about their wishes." I stood up slowly, gathering my jacket, the weight of the fabric feeling heavy on my shoulders. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Henderson. I appreciate your transparency." "Mark, wait," my mother called out as I headed for the door, her voice a desperate, pleading whisper. "We should discuss this as a family. Maybe Sunday dinner." I turned back, one last time, taking in the tableau before me. My nervous parents, my entitled brother, the attorney with his neat piles of papers, all documenting my family's complete disregard for my contributions, my sacrifices, my very existence beyond my financial utility. "I won't be at dinner," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. "I have some financial planning of my own to do." I walked out, not looking back, ignoring my mother's increasingly frantic calls and my father's suddenly authoritative voice, demanding I come back in. In the elevator, descending to the parking garage, my phone began buzzing relentlessly with texts and calls. I switched it to silent. The drive home was on autopilot, a blur of familiar streets and traffic lights. I was in a state of numb disbelief, the sheer magnitude of the betrayal not yet fully registering. It wasn't about the money itself. It was what the money represented. Years of unreciprocated support, of being taken for granted, of being valued only for what I could provide. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that in my family's eyes, I wasn't a son or a brother. I was an ATM with a pulse, and it was time to close that account, permanently. My apartment was in a converted industrial building, not luxurious by any stretch, but spacious and conveniently located near my office. I'd been meticulously saving for a house of my own, a real home, but I kept delaying the purchase, always finding another urgent need to help with my parents' financial difficulties. The irony wasn't lost on me. Once inside, I poured myself 2 fingers of good whiskey, the kind that warmed you from the inside out, and sat at my kitchen counter, staring blankly at the exposed brick wall. The numbness that had enveloped me in the attorney's office was slowly wearing off, giving way to waves of anger, then hurt, then a profound confusion that settled deep in my bones. My phone, still on silent, continued vibrating in my pocket, a relentless buzzing. 7 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and countless text messages, blinking notifications I couldn't bring myself to read. After finishing my drink, the whiskey doing little to dull the ache, I moved to my home office. If I was going to process this betrayal, I needed to understand its full scope. I pulled up my banking records, the digital ledger of my financial life, and began a methodical review of exactly how much financial support I'd provided my family over the years. It was painstaking. I clicked through months, then years of statements, my eyes scanning for transfers, for payments, for anything that linked my money to theirs. The numbers started adding up, chillingly so. First, there was the college tuition for Kyle. My parents had claimed they couldn't cover his sophomore year expenses, so I'd contributed $14,000 directly to them. Then the medical bills for my father's heart procedure and follow-up care, $32,175. I saw the transfer, clear as day. Home repairs, a new roof, updated plumbing, electrical work, when they discovered ancient knob and tube wiring in their attic. That tallied up to $22,150. Then the monthly transfers over the past 5 years. The $2,800 per month for the past year alone was $33,600. Before that, variable amounts, averaging about $1,500 monthly, which added up to another $90,000. And finally, miscellaneous emergency assistance, approximately $15,000 for car repairs, appliance replacements, and other unexpected expenses that always seemed to pop up. The total stunned me, over $175,000 in just 5 years alone. A staggering sum of money that could have grown my business faster, allowed me to purchase my own home years ago, or built a substantial nest egg for my retirement savings. It It was a physical weight pressing down on me. As I dug deeper into the bank statements, scrolling through transactions, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Several large withdrawals from my parents' account, an account to which I had contributed significantly, where my $800 monthly transfers landed, had been made the day before corresponding deposits into Kyle's personal account. It wasn't just that they planned to give Kyle everything after they died, they'd been funneling my financial assistance directly to him all along. My money, his allowance, his failed business ventures. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly under my weight, trying to process this new, sickening level of deception. It wasn't just favoritism, it was a deliberate, calculated redirection of my hard-earned money. My phone rang again, pulling me from the digital abyss. This time, it was Sarah Miller, my financial advisor. I had almost forgotten our scheduled quarterly review call. "Mark, how are you?" Her cheerful voice was jarring, a stark contrast to my current mood. "Not great, Sarah," I replied, then found myself explaining the entire situation, the words tumbling out in a rush, detailing the meeting, the will, the new mortgage, the chilling discovery in my bank statements. Sarah had been managing my business and personal finances for years, and she had often, gently, advised me to reconsider the amount of financial support I was providing my family. "I don't mean to say I told you so," she said, her voice softening after I finished. "But I've been concerned about this dynamic for a long time, Mark. The amount you've been contributing simply isn't sustainable if you want to meet your own financial goals." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling utterly lost, adrift in a sea of betrayal. "First," she instructed, her voice regaining its professional firmness, "cancel all automatic transfers immediately. You are not legally obligated to pay their mortgage or any other expenses." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Second, make an appointment with me next week. We need to recalibrate your entire financial plan without these obligations. And third," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "and this is personal advice, not financial. Consider talking to someone professional about the family dynamics at play here. This goes deeper than money." After hanging up, I immediately logged into my banking app. My fingers flew across the screen, a surge of adrenaline pushing me forward. I located the automatic transfers to my parents' account. The next payment would have gone through in 3 days. I canceled it. Without a moment's hesitation, I felt a momentary pang of something that might have been guilt, a flicker of the old conditioning, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce, unyielding resolve. They had made their choice, very clear, at the attorney's office. I texted my friend Chris, one of the few people who truly understood the bizarre, tangled web of my family's situation. "Need to talk. Parents just cut me out of inheritance while expecting me to keep funding their lifestyle." "Jesus, coming over now, bringing beer," Chris responded immediately. That was Chris, always there. An hour later, Chris sat across from me at my kitchen table, shaking his head slowly as I showed him the financial records, the damning bank statements, and recounted every painful detail of the meeting. "Mark," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "this isn't just family drama. This is emotional abuse, financial exploitation. They're treating you like a resource, not a son." "I keep thinking I must have done something to deserve this," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "Some way I failed them as a son." The words felt heavy, tainted with years of ingrained self-blame. Chris leaned forward, his gaze direct, unyielding. "That's the manipulation talking, man. Seriously. You have been the definition of a supportive son. This isn't about you failing them. It's about them failing you." His words hit me hard. They landed with the weight of truth. For years, decades even, I'd been trying to earn my parents' approval and appreciation, convinced that if I just did enough, gave enough, succeeded enough, they would finally see me as equal to Kyle in their eyes. I had been chasing an impossible goal, a mirage of acceptance that would never materialize. The realization was both devastating and liberating. "I need to make some changes," I said finally. The words solid, resolute. "Like what?" Chris asked, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "Beyond the financial stuff," I explained. "I need to set boundaries, real ones. No more Sunday dinners where I'm ignored. No more emergency calls for money. No more being the family ATM." "It won't be easy," Chris warned, his expression grim. "They're going to push back hard when they realize the gravy train has stopped." I know, I nodded, a newfound resolve hardening my jaw. But I can't keep doing this. It's killing me, slowly. After Chris left, the apartment feeling strangely quiet after the storm of my emotions, I moved back to my home office. I made a list. A concrete, actionable list. 1. Cancel all automatic transfers. Already done. 2. Remove myself as co-signer or guarantor on any remaining accounts where possible. 3. Set up an appointment with a therapist to deal with the family trauma. Sarah's advice, echoing my own growing realization. 4. Schedule a meeting with Sarah Miller to rebuild my financial plan. 5. Draft clear communication to parents about new boundaries. I was under no illusions that this would be simple or painless. 32 years of established family dynamics, of ingrained patterns of behavior, don't change overnight. But for the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. Not out of selfishness, but out of a necessary act of self-preservation. That night, before I tried to sleep, I finally read the barrage of messages from my family. My mother's texts ranged from feigned concern, "Are you okay? Please call us," to outright guilt-inducing, "After everything we've done for you." My father's were more direct, more authoritative. "You're overreacting. Call immediately to discuss your responsibilities." And Kyle, my brother, had sent just one brief, venomous message. "Way to make everything about you again." I turned off my phone. The screen went dark, and the incessant buzzing finally stopped. I went to bed, preparing myself for the storm that would surely follow when my family discovered I had cut off the flow of money. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, raw and painful, but tonight I needed rest. The immense weight of financial obligation had been lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a heavier but ultimately necessary burden, the burden of establishing independence from toxic family ties. As I drifted off to sleep, a strange, quiet realization settled over me. For the first time in years, I was making a decision based entirely on what was right for me, not what my family expected or demanded. It felt terrifying. It felt necessary. It felt long overdue. The first indication that my parents had discovered the canceled transfers came at precisely 9:17 the following Wednesday morning. I was at a job site, deep in conversation with a client, reviewing blueprint modifications for a custom home build, when my phone exploded with notifications. From Mom, "There must be a mistake with the bank. Your monthly transfer didn't come through." From Dad, "Call immediately about the financial situation. This is unacceptable." 3 missed calls from their number in the span of 5 minutes. I muted my phone, forcing myself to maintain professional composure. My client was looking at me expectantly, waiting for my input. I finished my meeting, my mind racing, despite my outward calm. I knew, with absolute certainty, that my family was likely working themselves into a frenzy. By the time I returned to my truck, the notifications had multiplied. 7 missed calls, and a voicemail from my father that started with heavy, exasperated breathing, and ended with, "This childish behavior stops now, Mark. You have responsibilities." Responsibilities, as if I hadn't been shouldering more than my fair share for years. Rather than calling back immediately, I drove directly to my office. I asked my assistant, Lisa, to hold all non-urgent calls. I needed to prepare for this conversation. I needed to gather my thoughts, to review the financial facts, to shore up my resolve. After 30 minutes of collecting myself, of mentally rehearsing the difficult words, I called my parents' house. My mother answered on the first ring, her voice tight with a mixture of relief and panic. "Mark, thank goodness, there's been some mistake with the bank." "It's not a mistake, Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady, unwavering. "I've canceled the transfers." Silence. A beat of shocked silence on the other end of the line, then her voice rising in disbelief. "You what?" "But the mortgage payment is due in 2 days." "I'm aware of that," I replied, my tone flat. "It's not my mortgage." "I don't understand," she stammered, then her voice hardened. "Is this because of the meeting with Mr. Henderson? Are you punishing us over some perceived slight?" "Perceived slight?" I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. "You remortgaged your house using my money to fund Kyle's business, then cut me out of your will entirely. That's not a perceived slight, Mom. That's a calculated decision." I heard muffled conversation, then my father's voice, rough with anger, came on the line. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Mark?" he demanded. His voice tight, strained. "Your mother is in tears." I'm establishing financial boundaries, I replied, my voice still calm, almost unnervingly so. Something I should have done years ago. We're your parents, he shouted, his voice cracking with indignation. You don't get to establish boundaries with us. We raised you, put a roof over your head, fed you. And I've repaid that 10 times over, I interrupted, cutting him off before he could continue his tired lecture. I've contributed over $175,000 to your household in the last 5 years alone. Money that apparently went to Kyle's failed ventures and this new mortgage I knew nothing about. That's what family does, he insisted, his voice rising, refusing to acknowledge my point. They help each other. Funny how the help only flows in one direction in this family, I countered, my voice laced with years of suppressed resentment. From me to everyone else. The conversation deteriorated from there. My father threatened, my mother pleaded, their voices overlapping in a desperate, chaotic symphony of manipulation. But I remained firm. I didn't yell. I didn't back down. It ended with my father declaring, his voice laced with venom, "If this is how you want it, fine. Don't expect to be welcome at Sunday dinner anymore." It was meant to hurt me. It was meant to make me feel isolated, abandoned. But instead, I felt oddly liberated. "That works for me," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "Goodbye." I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly despite my calm exterior. Lisa knocked and entered my office, her expression concerned. "Everything okay, boss? You look pale." "Family drama," I said tersely, waving her off. Nothing to worry about. But there was plenty to worry about, as I discovered 3 days later. My parents showed up, unannounced and completely uninvited, at an active construction site. I was reviewing electrical work with my lead contractor, discussing conduit runs and load calculations, when I heard my name being called, too loudly, over the din of machinery. Turning, I saw them approaching, my mother in tears, her face blotchy and red. My father's face set in grim determination. "This is inappropriate," I said quietly, as they reached me, acutely aware that several workers had stopped what they were doing and were openly staring. "I'm working." "You've left us no choice," my father replied, his voice carrying across the site, loud enough that several more workers turned to look, their curiosity piqued. "You've abandoned your family obligations." I took a deep breath, trying to control the surge of anger. "Let's talk in my trailer, now." Once inside the small, cramped job site office, I closed the door firmly, cutting off the noise and the prying eyes. "What do you think you're accomplishing by coming to my workplace?" I asked, keeping my voice low, but firm. "We can't pay the mortgage," my mother sobbed, collapsing onto the small, worn bench, her face buried in her hands. "The bank called this morning about the missed payment." "That's between you and the bank," I replied, leaning against the counter, crossing my arms. "Or you and Kyle, since he'll be inheriting the house." "Kyle can't help right now," my father said dismissively, waving a hand. "His business is still getting established." "And my business doesn't matter," I countered, my voice rising slightly. "My professional reputation? You just risked that by creating a scene in front of my crew and a major client." "Don't be dramatic," my father scoffed, dismissing my concern. "We're your parents. We needed to see you since you're ignoring our calls." "I'm not ignoring them," I corrected him, my patience wearing thin. "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference." I checked my watch, a deliberate gesture. "I have a meeting in 15 minutes. You need to leave." "We're not leaving until you fix this," my father declared, crossing his arms, a look of stubborn defiance on his face. I picked up my phone. "Then I'll call security to escort you out." My mother gasped, her head snapping up, her eyes wide with shock. "You wouldn't! Try me." The standoff lasted another tense minute. My father's eyes searched mine, looking for a flicker of weakness, a hint that I was bluffing. He found none. Finally, he grabbed my mother's arm, his face a mask of thwarted fury. "Come on, Carol. He's made his choice. Let him live with it." They left, their figures receding, my mother still sobbing. I sat down heavily in my chair, the adrenaline crashing, leaving me feeling hollow and exhausted. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. "Real big man threatening security on our parents. They're about to lose their house because of your ego trip." I didn't respond. Instead, I called Sarah Miller and scheduled an emergency financial review. If my family was escalating to workplace confrontations, I needed to ensure all my business assets were fully protected. That evening, I returned home to find my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, waiting patiently outside my apartment building. Unlike my parents, Aunt Susan had always treated me and Kyle equally, a rare beacon of fairness in our family. We'd maintained a good relationship over the years. "I come in peace," she said, holding up her hands in a gesture of surrender as I approached cautiously. "Your mother called me hysterical. I wanted to hear your side before jumping to conclusions." Over coffee in my kitchen, I explained everything: the years of financial support, the revelation at the attorney's office, the canceled transfers, and today's mortifying workplace confrontation. Aunt Susan listened intently, without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled as I spoke. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. "Mark, I had no idea it was this bad," she admitted, her voice low. "Your mother told me you suddenly cut them off financially for no reason. She didn't mention anything about the estate planning or the remortgage." "They're twisting the narrative," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Making me the villain." "Family patterns run deep, Mark," Aunt Susan sighed, a look of weary familiarity on her face. "Your grandmother did the same thing with your mother and your Aunt Linda. Carol was the responsible one, the caregiver. Linda was the favorite, the one who always needed looking after. History repeats itself." "So I'm doomed to be the family ATM forever?" I asked, the question laced with a despair I didn't want to admit. "No," Aunt Susan said firmly, her eyes meeting mine, a spark of resolve in them. "You're breaking the pattern. It's painful, it's messy, but it's necessary." After Aunt Susan left, promising to provide perspective to the extended family about the situation, I felt marginally better. At least someone in the family understood my position. That feeling was short-lived. Over the next 2 weeks, I received a barrage of calls from various relatives. Some were sympathetic after hearing Aunt Susan's account, their voices hushed with concern. Others were openly berating me for abandoning my parents, based entirely on the distorted version they'd heard from my mother. At work, my colleague Tom, a seasoned veteran of office politics and family drama, noticed my distraction during a project meeting. "Everything okay, boss?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I gave him the condensed version, the bare bones of the situation. "Man, that's rough," he said, shaking his head. "My sister pulls similar stuff with our parents, though not nearly to this extent. Family dynamics are a minefield." "I'm trying to focus on work," I told him, forcing a smile. "Growing the business is the one thing that still makes sense right now." "Smart move," Tom nodded. "Success is the best revenge. Hey, a bunch of us are going for beers Friday after work. You should come, get your mind off all this." I accepted, grateful for the offer of normal social interaction amidst the escalating family chaos. Building connections outside my toxic family dynamic suddenly seemed vital to my mental health. Meanwhile, the pressure campaign from my parents continued. Relentless and insidious, daily calls, emotional text messages, even a tearful voicemail from my mother saying, "We don't understand why you're punishing us like this after everything we've sacrificed for you." The gaslighting was breathtaking in its audacity. They had sacrificed nothing for me since I was 18. If anything, I had been the one making the sacrifices to support them, and, by extension, Kyle. The situation reached a breaking point weeks after I'd canceled the transfers. I was reviewing quarterly projections, a stack of spreadsheets open on my computer, when my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Mortgage payment due today. Bank threatening foreclosure proceedings if not received by 5 p.m. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. It was the oldest trick in the book, designed to trigger guilt without actually addressing the issue at hand. Finally, I typed 2 words and hit send. "Not mine." My mother's response came almost immediately. A single crying emoji, followed by silence. It was classic emotional manipulation. 101. I put my phone away and tried to return to work, but my concentration was shot. 20 minutes later, my father called. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded without preamble, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. "Your mother is having a breakdown." "I've made my position clear," I replied, keeping my voice steady, my tone even. "The mortgage isn't my responsibility." "We're about to lose our home," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "The home you grew up in." "The home you remortgaged to fund Kyle's business venture without telling me," Despite knowing I was making the payments, I corrected him, my voice still quiet. The home that's going to Kyle anyway, according to your estate plan. This isn't about the will, he blustered, trying to shift the argument to pull me back into the familiar pattern of manipulation. This is about family loyalty. Loyalty works both ways, Dad, I said. He continued ranting, his voice getting louder and louder until I had to hold the phone away from my ear. When he finally paused for breath, I spoke quietly. I need to go. I have a business to run. If you hang up this phone, don't ever expect... I ended the call. My hands were shaking slightly. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. You selfish piece of shit. They're about to lose everything because of you. I always knew you were jealous of me, but this is low, even for you. I blocked his number without responding. There was no point engaging with someone who had such a distorted view of reality. Such a complete lack of awareness. 2 hours later, as I was leaving a meeting with a potential client, I saw my parents' car pull into the parking lot of my office building. My stomach dropped. Not again. I quickened my pace, hoping to get inside before they spotted me, but I was too late. Mark, my mother called, her voice carrying across the asphalt. Please, just talk to us. Several of my employees were arriving for the afternoon shift. They turned to stare as my parents approached. My mother's face streaked with tears, my father's set in grim determination. This isn't the place, I said quietly, as they reached me, my voice low and urgent. You're embarrassing yourselves and damaging my professional reputation. We wouldn't have to come here if you'd answer our calls properly, my father retorted, his voice loud. Sir, is there a problem? It was Sergeant Evans, our head of security, who had noticed the commotion and approached with 2 other members of his team. His presence was calm, authoritative. These people were just leaving, I said firmly, giving my parents a pointed look. We're his parents, my mother protested, her voice rising hysterically. We have every right. Ma'am, this is private property, Sergeant Evans explained calmly, his voice even. If Mr. Anderson asks you to leave, you need to comply, or we'll have to escort you off the premises. You'd have security remove your own parents? My father's voice rose, incredulous, almost a shout. What kind of son? The kind who's tired of being manipulated and exploited, I cut in, my patience finally snapping. Leave now, or they will escort you out. Your choice. A tense standoff ensued. I maintained eye contact with my father, refusing to back down, refusing to give him even an inch. Finally, he grabbed my mother's elbow. Come on, Carol, our son has made his priorities clear. They retreated to their car, defeated. As they drove away, I thanked Sergeant Evans and headed inside, acutely aware of the curious stares from employees who had witnessed the scene. Lisa gave me a concerned look as I passed her desk. Everything okay, boss? Family issues? Family stuff, I said gruffly. I'm fine, thanks. If they come back, don't let them in the building. Once in my office, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking deep, shaky breaths to calm my racing heart. The public confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom, who had apparently heard about the incident already. Office grapevine says there was drama in the parking lot. You good? I replied, family stuff. I'm fine. Thanks for checking. That evening, I arrived home to find a letter from Kyle slipped under my door. Unlike his text messages, this was several pages long, scrawled in angry, hurried handwriting, filled with accusations, guilt trips, and thinly veiled threats. According to him, I was destroying the family out of jealousy and spite. He detailed all the ways our parents had supposedly favored me growing up, opportunities, attention, resources, painting a picture so divorced from reality that it would have been laughable if it weren't so deeply disturbing. The letter ended with, if they lose their house because of you, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I crumpled the letter, the paper crackling in my hand, and threw it away. Kyle's gaslighting wouldn't work on me anymore. I knew my truth, and I had the financial records to prove it. 2 days later, I received a call from Aunt Susan. Your parents are telling everyone you've abandoned them to become homeless, she said without preamble, her voice tight with exasperation. I've been trying to provide perspective, but they're on a full campaign to paint you as the villain. Let me guess, I sighed, running a hand over my face. They're not mentioning the remortgage, the estate planning, or the years of financial support I've provided? Of course not, Aunt Susan confirmed. They're playing full victims. Your mother called your cousin Sarah, crying that they might have to live in their car. They have options, I pointed out, listing them off. They could ask Kyle to help, since he's getting everything anyway. They could sell the house and downsize. They could get jobs. Dad took early retirement 5 years ago, but he's only 62. Mom still substitutes occasionally, but could work full-time. I know, Mark, Aunt Susan agreed. This isn't really about money. It's about control. They're panicking because you've changed the power dynamic. After talking with Aunt Susan, I decided it was time for a direct confrontation, but on my terms, not theirs. No more ambush at my workplace. No more frantic, emotional phone calls. I texted my parents. I'll come by the house tomorrow at 10 a.m. to talk. Just us. No Kyle. My father replied immediately, "We'll be here." The next morning, I drove to my childhood home, feeling strangely calm. I'd spent the evening preparing, gathering all my financial records, organizing my thoughts, steeling my resolve. This wouldn't be an emotional ambush. It would be a clear-eyed assessment of reality. My mother answered the door, her expression a careful, almost theatrical blend of hurt and hope. My father waited in the living room, standing stiffly by the fireplace, his arms crossed. "Thank you for coming," my mother said, her voice soft. Gesturing toward the couch, "Can I get you some coffee?" "No, thank you," I replied, setting my briefcase on the coffee table. "I won't be staying long." "What's in the briefcase?" my father asked suspiciously, his eyes narrowing. "Evidence," I said simply, unlatching the briefcase and removing a thick folder. "Financial records, every penny I've contributed to this household over the past 5 years. Bank statements showing transfers from your account to Kyle's that coincide exactly with my contributions. Copies of checks I've written for household repairs. Documentation of the $32,175 I paid for Dad's medical bills." I spread the papers across the coffee table, a physical manifestation of my support, my sacrifice, my financial history with them. My parents stared at them in uncomfortable silence. "I've given you $175,023 since 2017, I continued. My voice even, devoid of accusation, simply stating facts. Money that could have gone toward my own home, my retirement, or growing my business faster. I gave it freely because I thought we were family who supported each other. Then I discovered you've been redirecting my support to Kyle, and have now cut me out of your will entirely, while still expecting me to fund your lifestyle." "It's not like that," my mother protested weakly, her voice thin. "It's exactly like that," I countered, pointing to specific bank statements. Here, and here. Transfers from your account to Kyle's, the day after I deposited money for what I thought were your expenses. My father cleared his throat. "We've always helped both our children as needed." "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "You've always helped Kyle while expecting me to help myself, and you, and him. The money flows one way in this family, from me to everyone else." "So you're punishing us financially because you're jealous of your brother?" my father demanded, trying to turn the tables, to reframe my actions as petty envy. "I'm establishing boundaries because I refuse to be exploited anymore," I corrected him. "There's a difference." My mother began to cry. Real tears this time, not the performative dabbing. "We're going to lose our home, Mark. Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant," I said, my voice steady, unyielding. "What matters is the reality you've created. You remortgaged your home without telling me, despite knowing I was making the payments. You put everything in Kyle's name. These were your choices, not mine." "So you're just going to watch us become homeless?" my father challenged, his voice rising in disbelief. "You have options," I said, echoing my earlier conversation with Aunt Susan. "Kyle could help with the mortgage, since he'll inherit the house. You could sell and downsize. You could return to work full-time. The only option that's off the table is me continuing to fund a situation that exploits me." "After everything we've done for you," my mother whispered, shaking her head. Her eyes filled with a familiar mixture of hurt and self-pity. "What exactly have you done for me in the past decade, Mom?" I asked quietly, my gaze unwavering. "Besides take my money and give it to Kyle. Besides dismiss my accomplishments while celebrating his failures. Besides expect me to solve your financial problems while planning to leave me nothing." The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared out the window, his jaw clenched, his profile rigid. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her sobs subsiding into quiet sniffles. "I love you both," I said finally, gathering my documents and returning them to my briefcase. the papers rustling softly. But love doesn't mean allowing myself to be used. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than financial exploitation, I'll be here. Until then, I need to focus on my own well-being. As I rose to leave, my mother grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Please, Mark," she pleaded, her eyes wide. "We're sorry if you felt underappreciated. We can talk about the will. Maybe make some changes." The conditional nature of her offer, tied directly to my resuming financial support, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about love or family. It was about access to my wallet. "Goodbye, Mom," I said gently, disengaging her hand. "Dad." I walked to my car, leaving them standing in the living room, surrounded by the physical proof of my contributions and their betrayal. I felt a strange, complex mixture of sadness and liberation. The confrontation hadn't gone as I'd hoped. There had been no grand revelation, no genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no real accountability, but I had spoken my truth, clearly and firmly. I had established my boundaries. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. Not out of selfishness, but out of a necessary, profound act of self-preservation. It hurt, yes, but it was a clean pain, like setting a broken bone so it could finally heal properly. As I drove away from my childhood home, I realized I was also driving away from years of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but at least it was mine to travel, on my own terms. The 2 months following that final fraught confrontation with my parents brought significant transformative changes to my life. I threw myself into my work, channeling all that raw energy and frustration into something productive. Anderson Contracting secured 3 major new contracts, the kind that would keep my crew busy and expand our portfolio significantly well into the next year. It felt good, deeply satisfying, to build something tangible, something that couldn't be taken from me, something that was unequivocally mine. I also started meeting weekly with Dr. Emily Stone, a therapist specializing in family trauma. She was calm, insightful, and incredibly skilled at helping me recognize the subtle, insidious patterns of manipulation I had normalized since childhood. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief, Mark," Dr. Stone explained during one session, her voice soothing. "You're mourning the family relationship you deserved, but never truly had. It's okay to feel that loss." "Sometimes I still feel guilty," I admitted, the old conditioning creeping in. Like I should just write the check, make all this go away, make them happy. "That's the conditioning talking," she replied gently but firmly. "Healthy family relationships aren't transactional, Mark. Your worth isn't measured by your financial contributions. Your value isn't tied to your bank account." That was a profound, life-altering truth I was only just beginning to grasp. Outside of therapy, I began rebuilding my social life, something I had severely neglected while working constantly and managing one family crisis after another. Friday beers with Tom and other colleagues became a regular event, a space for genuine camaraderie and easy laughter. I joined a recreational basketball league that played Tuesday nights, rediscovering the joy of competition and teamwork. I started saying yes to invitations I would have previously declined, telling myself I was too busy with work or family obligations. At one of these social gatherings, a housewarming party for a client who had become a friend, I met Olivia Hayes. She was an architectural designer who had worked on the home's renovation, and she immediately captivated me with her intelligence and dry wit. We bonded over construction horror stories, tales of difficult clients and unexpected structural challenges, and a shared appreciation for mid-century modern design. When she gave me her number at the end of the evening, a warm, hopeful flutter of possibility sparked inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Our first date was dinner at a small, cozy Italian restaurant downtown. Olivia was intelligent, direct, and refreshingly straightforward, a stark contrast to the emotional complexities of my family. "So," she said, leaning forward slightly, her eyes sparkling, "tell me about your family. You mentioned things were complicated." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, how vulnerable to be. "It's complicated," I admitted. "We're going through some adjustments in our relationship." "Ah," she nodded knowingly, a small smile playing on her lips. "Family drama. I'm familiar with the concept. My parents divorced when I was 12, and it was World War II for about 5 years. Something about her understanding expression, her empathy, made me feel safe. safe enough to share more. I gave her the condensed version of recent events, the bare bones of the betrayal, the boundary setting. Wow, she said when I finished, her eyes wide. That's intense, but good for you for setting boundaries. You don't think I'm heartless for not bailing them out? I asked, the old doubts surfacing. She considered this seriously, her gaze steady. Mark, I think it takes tremendous courage to break unhealthy patterns, especially with family. The easy path would be writing the check. The growth path is what you're doing. Her validation, coming from someone objective, untainted by my family history or obligation, meant more than she could ever know. For weeks, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if I was being unnecessarily harsh. Olivia's perspective helped confirm that I wasn't crazy for demanding basic respect. Meanwhile, through Aunt Susan, I continued to receive updates about my parents' situation. They had, predictably, missed 2 mortgage payments and received formal notice from the bank about potential foreclosure proceedings. Kyle's upscale sports bar was struggling badly. He'd woefully underestimated operating costs and wildly overestimated revenue, a pattern grimly familiar from his previous ventures. Your mother called me in tears yesterday, Aunt Susan reported during one of our weekly check-in calls. She wanted to know if I could loan them money for the mortgage. What did you say? I asked, already suspecting the answer. I told her I'm on a fixed income and don't have that kind of money, which is true, she explained. But I also suggested they consider selling the house and downsizing to something manageable on their retirement income. Let me guess, I observed, a cynical smile on my face. They rejected that idea immediately. Your father said they shouldn't have to sacrifice their lifestyle because you're being stubborn, Aunt Susan confirmed, her voice laced with exasperation. I pointed out that expecting their adult son to fund their lifestyle was the actual unreasonable position. How did that go over? About as well as you'd expect, she sighed. Your mother cried harder, and your father hung up on me. A week later, Aunt Susan called again with news that Kyle had attempted to get a business loan, using the house as collateral, only to discover he couldn't do so without my parents' cooperation, and the bank, given the missed mortgage payments, was unwilling to extend further credit. He's apparently furious with your parents now, Aunt Susan reported, a hint of schadenfreude in her voice, blaming them for not disclosing the full financial situation when they remortgaged the house for his business. So now Kyle's turning on them too, I observed, the irony not lost on me. Family dynamics are shifting, Aunt Susan agreed. Your parents are discovering that Kyle's love and attention may be just as conditional as they feared yours was. True to Aunt Susan's prediction, the family power structure continued to fracture. Kyle began avoiding Sunday dinners, making increasingly flimsy excuses about needing to be at the bar or having important meetings. My parents, desperate to maintain some form of financial support, made their first tentative outreach to me in weeks. A text from my mother that read simply, "We miss you. Can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. I discussed it first with Dr. Stone in our next session. What do you want from a conversation with them, Mark? She asked, her gaze penetrating. Acknowledgement, I replied after consideration, the word solidifying my internal feelings. Recognition of how they've treated me, an actual apology, not just manipulative tears or vague regrets. And do you think they're capable of giving you that right now, she asked, her question giving me pause. No, I admitted finally, the truth settling over me. They're reaching out because they need money, not because they've had a genuine change of heart, not because they've understood their actions. Trust your instincts, Mark, Dr. Stone advised. You don't owe them a response, especially if you believe it's just another attempt at manipulation. I decided on a middle path, a way to maintain my boundary without being completely cold. I texted back. I'm not ready to talk yet. I need time and space. I hope you're doing well. Brief, compassionate, but firm in maintaining my boundaries. Their response came quickly. We understand. Just know we love you and are sorry for any misunderstandings. The bank is threatening foreclosure. Dad's blood pressure is very high from the stress. The immediate pivot to financial pressure and health concerns confirm my suspicions. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about accessing my bank account. I didn't respond. 3 days later, I received a group email addressed to several family members, including me. My parents were publicly announcing they might lose their home due to unexpected financial hardships, and were reaching out to loved ones for support during this difficult time. The email included their bank account information for those who felt called to help. It was a masterclass in manipulation, vague about the causes of their financial situation, heavy on emotional appeals, casting themselves as victims of circumstance, rather than the direct consequences of their own choices. Aunt Susan called me immediately. "Did you see that email? The nerve." "I saw it," I confirmed. Notice they didn't mention remortgaging their paid-off home for Kyle's bar, or the estate planning that cuts me out completely. "Several relatives have called me asking what's really going on," Aunt Susan said. "I've been candid about what I know. Your cousin Rachel was especially appalled. She said she'd experienced similar dynamics with your mother when they lived together in college." The extended family's response to my parents' fundraising attempt was underwhelming. A few distant relatives contributed small amounts, but most seemed to recognize the manipulation tactics at play, especially after hearing Aunt Susan's more complete version of events. Faced with limited financial support and Kyle's increasing absence, my parents made one more desperate attempt at reconciliation. My father left a voicemail that actually contained a partial acknowledgement. "Mark, it's Dad. Look, maybe we didn't handle the estate planning well. We should have discussed it with you, given your financial contributions. We're willing to reconsider some aspects if you'd be willing to help with the current situation. Call us back." It wasn't a genuine apology. It still framed their willingness to reconsider as contingent on my financial help. But it was the first crack in their united front of denial. The first hint that they recognized they might have acted inappropriately. I discussed the message with both Dr. Stone and Olivia, who had become an incredibly supportive and grounding presence in my life. "It's manipulation dressed up as reconciliation," Olivia observed over dinner at my apartment. "He's only acknowledging wrongdoing because the other options have dried up." "I agree," I said. "But it's also the first time either of them has admitted any fault at all. That's something, right?" "It's something," she conceded, "but not enough to justify re-entering a toxic situation." "What would happen if you helped them now? Would anything fundamentally change?" Her question echoed my own thoughts. Without genuine accountability and change behavior, any reconciliation would likely revert to the same unhealthy patterns. I decided to respond to my father with a brief, clear email. "Dad, I appreciate the acknowledgement that the estate planning should have been handled differently. I'm not in a position to provide financial assistance at this time. I would recommend considering selling the house and downsizing to something manageable on your retirement income. If you'd like to have a conversation that isn't about money, I'm open to that in the future. Mark." His reply came within minutes. "This isn't like you, Mark. Family helps family. Your mother is heartbroken by your coldness." The immediate reversion to guilt tactics confirmed I'd made the right decision. Meanwhile, my own life continued to improve, steadily, noticeably. Anderson Contracting secured its largest contract yet, a massive commercial renovation project that would significantly boost our profile in the industry. Olivia and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something that felt genuinely supportive and reciprocal. My friendship circle expanded through basketball leagues and industry networking events. For the first time in my adult life, I was building connections based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than obligation or manipulation. I was learning what healthy relationships actually felt like, and the contrast with my family dynamic became increasingly stark. When Dr. Stone asked, during one session, what I'd learned from the entire experience, my answer surprised even me. "I've learned," I said, thinking carefully, "that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for others, is to stop enabling destructive patterns. My parents and Kyle will never truly grow or change as long as I'm cushioning them from the consequences of their choices." "That's a profound insight," she said. "How does it feel to recognize that?" I considered the question carefully. "Sad," I admitted, "because I wish things could be different. I wish they could have been different for a long time, but also peaceful, because I'm no longer carrying the weight of their choices on my shoulders. Their problems are truly their problems now." As the 6-month mark of my financial separation approached, Aunt Susan called with news that actually made me smile. My parents had finally listed their house for sale. "They're looking at condos in a 55-plus community," she reported. her voice laced with a relieved humor. Your father is even talking about picking up some consulting work to supplement their retirement income. That's actually good, I said, genuinely pleased. Those are appropriate, adult solutions to their situation. I think reality finally sank in, Mark, Aunt Susan agreed. And between us, I think they miss you. You, the person, not you, the ATM. Your mother asked if you seemed happy when I talked to you. What did you tell her? The truth, she said, her voice warm. That you seem healthier and more at peace than I've seen you in years. After hanging up, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The situation with my family remained unresolved in many ways, yes, but for the first time, I felt genuinely hopeful that something healthier might eventually emerge from the ashes of our old dynamic. The path forward was still uncertain, but at least it was a path of my own choosing, one built on self-respect, clear boundaries, and the courage to demand the same consideration I'd always given others. And regardless of what happened with my family, I was no longer waiting for their approval or appreciation to live my life fully. That perhaps was the most valuable outcome of all. The for sale sign appeared in my parents' front yard in early November, almost exactly 6 months after that fateful, gut-wrenching meeting at the attorney's office. Aunt Susan texted me a photo of it with the caption, "Progress." I felt a complex mix of emotions, a huge wave of relief that they were finally taking responsible action, a pang of sadness for the loss of my childhood home, and a lingering sense of hurt that it had taken such extreme measures to reach this point. 2 weeks after listing the house, my parents accepted an offer, slightly below asking price, but still sufficient to pay off the remortgage and leave them with a modest sum to put toward a smaller place. They found a 2-bedroom condo in a retirement community about 30 minutes outside the city. It was significantly less grand than their sprawling family house, but it was perfectly adequate for their needs, more manageable. It felt like a tangible step towards true independence for them. Meanwhile, Kyle's sports bar continued struggling, despite his increasingly desperate promotional efforts. The prime location he'd selected, which had seemed so promising when he signed the lease, turned out to have insufficient parking and stiff competition from established venues nearby. According to Aunt Susan, he'd even been forced to take a part-time job as a sales representative for a beverage distributor to supplement his dwindling income from the bar. Reality is hitting him hard, Mark, Aunt Susan reported during one of our regular calls. He actually asked your father for advice about possibly selling the business before it completely tanks. That's surprising, I admitted. Kyle had always rejected advice, preferring to learn lessons the hard way, usually with a convenient financial safety net provided by our parents, or indirectly, by me. I think he's growing up finally, Aunt Susan suggested. Nothing matures you quite like facing the consequences of your choices without a bailout. My own life had settled into a new, healthier rhythm. Anderson Contracting was thriving. We'd expanded to 15 full-time employees and had projects booked 6 months in advance. I'd finally purchased my own home, a mid-century modern fixer-upper that Olivia was helping me renovate on weekends. Our relationship had grown steadily stronger, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine emotional support. I continued seeing Dr. Stone, though we'd reduced our sessions to twice monthly as I became more confident in maintaining boundaries and recognizing manipulation tactics. During one session in late November, she asked if I ever regretted my decision to cut financial ties with my family. Not the decision itself, I replied after consideration. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that we couldn't have an honest conversation about expectations and contributions without it becoming a crisis. But establishing those boundaries was essential for my well-being. And how are you feeling about the possibility of reconciliation? She asked cautiously, her gaze assessing. Open, I admitted. If they can respect my boundaries and truly acknowledge the patterns that led us here, I'd like to have a relationship with them, a healthier one, with clear expectations on both sides. That opportunity came sooner than expected. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I received a handwritten letter from my father, the first written communication he'd sent that wasn't an email or text message in probably 15 years. I opened it with a mix of trepidation and curiosity, half expecting another guilt trip or financial appeal. Instead, I found something I never received from my father before, a genuine apology. "Dear Mark," he wrote in his precise engineer's handwriting, "I've started and discarded this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. The simple truth is that your mother and I have treated you unfairly for many years. We took your success and responsibility as license to expect more and more from you while giving less and less in return. The estate planning decisions were the culmination of years of unbalanced family dynamics, and your reaction, while painful for us, was justified. Selling the house and downsizing has been humbling, but necessary. For the first time in years, we're living within our means instead of depending on your generosity. I've even taken a part-time consulting position with my old firm, which provides enough supplemental income to cover our expenses. Kyle is also facing his own reckoning. His business is failing despite the investment we made, and he's finally recognizing that success requires more than charm and optimism. He would never admit this to you, but he respects what you've built through hard work and discipline. I don't expect this letter to immediately repair the damage we've done to our relationship, but I hope it might be a first step toward a more honest and balanced connection in the future, if you're willing. With love and regret, Dad." I read the letter 3 times, processing its significance. It contained no request for money, no subtle guilt trips, no minimizing of their actions, just acknowledgement, accountability, and an open door to reconciliation without pressure. I shared the letter with Olivia that evening as we worked on installing kitchen cabinets in my new house. "Wow," she said after reading it, her voice filled with surprise. "That's actually a real apology. No buts, no excuses, no manipulation." "I know," I agreed, still somewhat stunned. "I'm not sure I ever expected to get this from him." "So what are you going to do?" she asked, handing me a cabinet door to hold while she attached the hinges. I considered the question carefully. "I think I'll call him, not immediately jump back into regular family gatherings, but take a small step toward rebuilding communication. Cautious optimism." "That seems healthy," she approved, her smile warm. 2 days later, I called my father. The conversation was initially awkward, both of us uncertain of this new territory where old patterns no longer applied. But gradually, we found our way to more authentic communication than we'd had in years. He explained that my mother was still struggling to fully accept her role in the family breakdown, but had agreed to attend therapy sessions with him to work through their issues. Kyle, he told me, had finally decided to sell the sports bar and was negotiating with a potential buyer who might keep him on as manager, allowing him to learn the business properly without bearing the full financial risk. "We're having a small Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow," my father said tentatively, near the end of our call. "Just us, Kyle, and Aunt Susan. You'd be welcome to join, no pressure, of course." I hesitated. "I actually have plans with Olivia's family," I said truthfully. "But maybe we could have coffee next week, just you and me." The relief in his voice was palpable. "I'd like that very much, son." Over the following weeks, I gradually re-established contact with my family. Careful, measured steps, rather than an immediate return to previous patterns. Coffee with my father became a weekly ritual, a chance for genuine conversation, for us to slowly rebuild a foundation of trust. My mother eventually reached out with her own apology, less direct than my father's, but sincere in its own way. "I always thought I was being a good mother by protecting Kyle," she admitted during our first one-on-one lunch. "I never realized I was actually hindering his growth while taking you for granted." Kyle and I had our own reckoning shortly before Christmas. He'd successfully sold his bar to a restaurant group and was learning the management side of the business under their guidance. "I've been an entitled jerk, Mark," he acknowledged over beers at a neutral location, definitely not his former bar. "I resented your success instead of learning from it, and I took it for granted that you'd always be there to indirectly bail me out through Mom and Dad." "We were both playing roles assigned to us as kids," I offered. "The responsible one and the charmed one. Breaking those patterns isn't easy." For Christmas, I decided to help my parents with their condo deposit, not as an ongoing obligation, but as a one-time gift, freely given. I made it clear this wasn't a return to previous arrangements, and they accepted the contribution with genuine gratitude, rather than entitled expectation. It was a moment of true, healthy giving. The new year brought continued healing and adjustment. My relationship with Olivia deepened. We began tentatively discussing a future together. My business continued to thrive, and I finally felt free to enjoy my success without the constant drain of family financial obligations. My parents settled into their new, more modest lifestyle with surprising grace. My father's part-time consulting evolved into a small business of his own, providing engineering expertise to residential construction firms, including occasionally mine. My mother began volunteering at a local elementary school, eventually accepting a paid position as a teacher's aide. Kyle's growth was perhaps the most surprising development. The humbling experience of business failure, followed by the structured learning environment of his management position, matured him considerably. He began dating a level-headed woman who challenged his more impulsive tendencies, and he developed a genuine interest in understanding business operations, rather than just chasing quick success. During a family dinner in early spring, now a monthly occurrence rather than the weekly obligation it had once been, my mother made an observation that truly captured how far we'd all come. "It's strange," she said, looking around the table at her husband, her 2 sons, and the women in our lives, Olivia beside me. "For years, I worried so much about what would happen to this family if Mark stopped supporting us financially. I never imagined we'd all end up stronger and happier for it." Later that evening, as Olivia and I drove home, she asked if I had any regrets about how things had unfolded. "Just one," I replied after consideration. "I wish I'd established those boundaries years earlier, before resentment had built up on all sides. But I'm grateful we found our way to healthier relationships eventually." "That's what matters in the end," she agreed, squeezing my hand. "Not that you got there perfectly, but that you got there at all." In the years since that fateful meeting at the attorney's office, I'd learned profound lessons about family, boundaries, and self-worth. I'd discovered that true love doesn't exploit or take for granted. I'd realized that sometimes the most caring action is refusing to enable harmful patterns. And perhaps most importantly, I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't require returning to unhealthy dynamics. It's possible to forgive while maintaining the boundaries necessary for everyone's growth. My family relationships would never be perfect. We all carried scars from the patterns we'd participated in for decades. But they were now built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine care, rather than obligation, exploitation, and imbalanced expectations. That transformation, painful and messy as it had been, was worth every difficult moment along the way. It brought me peace, allowed me to thrive, and showed me what true love and respect really felt like. So that's my story. It was a wild ride, and honestly, the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But I promise you, standing up for myself, for my own worth, was the best decision I ever made. It's terrifying, yes, but it's also incredibly liberating. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that flicker of recognition, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for your own worth. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves out there.